The sun in Arizona in 1878 was a merciless, sovereign thing. It ruled the sky from one jagged horizon to the next, bleaching the very color from the rocks and baking the earth into a cracked, pale grid of thirst. This was the high desert, a sprawling, empty canvas of rust and sagebrush, beautiful in the way a cougar was beautiful, all lean muscle and sleeping danger. The air itself was thin and sharp, smelling of dust and pine and something ancient. Out here, silence was the loudest sound, a ringing emptiness that pressed against the ears. It was a land of profound distances, where a man could ride for 3 days and see nothing but the shimmer of heat on the horizon and the slow, patient circling of a hawk. Into this silence, the 1870s had brought the clash of worlds. The telegraph wires were being strung, thin black lines of progress stitching the emptiness together. The railroad was coming, a rumor of iron and steam, and with them came the government, the surveyors, the soldiers in their dusty blue coats, and the treaties that were signed in bad faith and broken before the ink was dry. The Dean, the Navajo people, had been pushed and pulled, moved and returned, their lives scattered by forces they could not control. The mountains, their sacred anchors, now overlooked valleys dotted with new, raw settlements, places built of rough sawn pine and hopeful desperation. Tension was a constant, low hum beneath the wind, a second sun that never set. Mia Carter knew the weight of that sun better than most. At 20, she felt closer to 40. She sat her horse, a sweat-streaked bay, on a low rise overlooking the shallow, muddy ribbon of her creek. The cottonwoods along its bank were the only deep green for miles, a defiant splash of life. Her father's house, a solid 2-story ranch built of river stone and determination, sat a quarter-mile back. It looked smaller now, emptier. She was her father's daughter in every way that mattered. She had his gray eyes, steady and clear, and his stubborn chin. But where Daniel Carter's hands had been broad and confident, Mia's were slender, scarred, and cracked from work they were never meant to do. She wore her father's old denim trousers, patched at the knee, and a man's shirt, faded to a pale, indeterminate blue. Her hair, the color of dark honey, was braided and pinned tight, but strands always escaped to whip against her face in the wind. 2 years. It had been 2 years since the rock slide that had taken her father. A freak accident. They called it. Mia knew better. A freak accident did not involve a neatly split cinch on his saddle, but the sheriff in town had just shrugged, his eyes avoiding hers. He had called it a tragedy and closed the book. Since then, everything Daniel Carter had built had begun to slide, like pebbles in a wash. The Cattlemen's Association, once so respectful, now offered prices that were insults. Her best hands had drifted away, spooked by bad luck or, more likely, paid off by a better offer. Now she had only one old hand left, Jed, who was more rheumatism than man, but loyal as a hound. She was drowning in debt. The ranch, the spread her father had bled for, was mortgaged to the hilt, and the man who held the note was the same man who, she was certain, had loosened that cinch. Her gaze drifted east, toward the low, hazy mountains. She was alone. Her mother had died when she was a child, and her brother had run off to California 5 years ago, chasing gold and leaving only silence. The loneliness was a physical ache, a cold stone in her gut. She missed her father's laugh, the solid, reassuring smell of his tobacco and leather. She missed the simple, profound comfort of not being the only one. Now, every decision, every failure, every small victory was hers alone. She was strong. Yes, she had to be. But she was tired. Tired of fighting. Tired of the dust. Tired of being looked at in town with that mix of pity and speculation. She was a woman alone, and in this territory, that was a dangerous thing to be. A prize or a problem. In town, Silas Crow was neither. He was the solution. The town of Redemption was a hopeful name for a place that offered very little of it. It was 2 rows of false-fronted buildings facing each other across a wide, dusty street that turned to knee-deep mud in the rains. It had a saloon, a general store, a blacksmith, a land office, and a sheriff. Silas Crow owned the saloon, the general store, and the land office. The sheriff, effectively, worked for him too. Silas was a man who looked like he belonged in a Chicago boardroom, not an Arizona dust bowl. He wore tailored suits of dark wool, a starched white shirt, and a silk waistcoat. His beard was neatly trimmed, and his hands were soft and clean. He smelled faintly of bay rum and expensive cigars. He was a merchant, a businessman, a land speculator. He brought capital, he said. He brought progress. What he brought was a velvet-gloved fist. He sat in his office at the back of the general store, a room of dark, heavy furniture that must have cost a fortune to haul across the desert. He sipped whiskey from a clean glass and looked at a map spread on his desk. The map showed the county, and a large, significant portion of it was outlined in red ink. That was the Carter Ranch. It bordered the creek for 3 miles. Water. In Arizona, water was not just life. It was power. It was everything. Silas Crow collected power. He had come west with nothing and had built an empire by understanding one simple truth: the law followed the man who paid for it. He foreclosed on ranchers who missed a payment, bought up water rights from men too desperate to know their worth, and ran off those who wouldn't sell. His methods were brutal, but always at one remove. He never held the torch himself. He had men for that. His foreman, a hard case named Dutch, stood by the window, blocking the light. Dutch was everything Silas was not: filthy, hulking, and blunt. Silas tapped the map. He said without looking up that Miss Carter was proving to be remarkably stubborn. Dutch grunted. He suggested they could be more persuasive. A night ride, perhaps. Silas steepled his clean fingers. He said no, not yet, not while the territorial governor was sniffing around. This had to be clean. The foreclosure was in 2 weeks. He wanted her gone before then. He suggested that perhaps her cattle might find a break in her fence line, a large break. He wanted her to feel the pinch, to understand the hopelessness of her position. He wanted her to walk away. Dutch smiled, a grim splitting of his beard. He said he understood. Silas nodded, dismissing him. He leaned back in his chair. He had patience. He would get the land. He always got the land. He had deals with the coming railroad, and that creek was essential. The Carter girl was an unfortunate, temporary complication. He felt no malice toward her, only a mild annoyance, the way one might feel about a stubborn fly. He would swat her, and then he would continue his work. His connections to the local authorities were secure. The sheriff was in his pocket. The judge owed him for his last election campaign. He was, in all practical ways, the law, and the law was about to make him a very, very rich man. Far from the town, beyond the reach of maps and mortgages, a man moved through the canyons. He did not own the land, nor did he wish to. He belonged to it. His name was Taza. He was Dine, a Navajo. He was tall for his people, with the long, graceful build of a runner. He moved with a silence that was almost unnatural. He wore buckskin leggings and a faded calico shirt, his black hair tied back with a simple leather thong. His face was a mask of planes and angles, his eyes dark and watchful, holding depths of sorrow and strength that few could read. Taza was a warrior, but he had seen enough of war. He had been a boy during the Huildi, the Long Walk, when his people were forced from their lands and marched hundreds of miles to the Bosque Redondo in New Mexico. He had seen the sickness, the starvation, the death. He had seen his grandmother perish on the trail, and his uncles shot for slowing down. He had survived that place, that prison. And when his people were finally allowed to return to a sliver of their homeland, he had returned with them. But the world he returned to was not the one he had left. The treaty lands were too small. The settlers, the Bilagana, were everywhere. They brought their cattle, their fences, their iron roads that scarred the earth. They did not understand the land. They only understood how to take from it. Taza lived mostly alone, in the high, hidden places, the canyon lands that were his fortress. He was a man of profound faith, not in a single god, but in the harmony of the world, the Hozho. He knew the songs for the dawn, the prayers for the rain. He knew how to listen to the wind and read the stories in the stones. He also carried loss. His wife and child were gone, taken by the cough sickness that had swept through a winter camp 3 years prior. The grief was a part of him now, like a shadow that walked beside him. It did not make him weak. It had tempered him. It made him a fierce protector of what remained. He stood on a high mesa, looking down at the valley. He could see the Carter Ranch, the stone house, the thread of the creek. He had watched that ranch for years. The old man, Daniel Carter, had been different from the others. He had not pushed into their sacred canyons. He had spoken to them once, years ago. A cautious but fair trade for grazing rights in a dry season. Taza had respected him, as much as one could respect a man who lived on stolen land. Now, he watched the daughter. He saw her riding the fence lines, doing a man's work. He saw the weariness in her shoulders. He also saw the men who watched her. He had seen them 2 nights ago, Dutch and another man, riding the ridge near her property, carrying torches that they did not light. They were waiting. Taza knew their kind. They were buzzards, men who fed on the weakness of others. He had seen Silas Crow, too, the man in the clean suit who came in a shiny black buggy. He was the source. He was the sickness. Crow was buying up land, pushing his fences farther and farther into the hills, choking off the high pastures where the Navajo grazed their small flocks of sheep. Crow's men had poisoned a spring last month, a spring his people had used for generations. Taza's heart was heavy. He was a warrior, but his people were few, their weapons old. To fight men like Crow directly was suicide. The army would come, and the cycle would begin again. He was bound by the wisdom of his elders, who preached peace, no matter how bitter. But he was also a man, and he could not stand by while the land was poisoned and the innocent were crushed. He watched the woman in the valley below. She was part of the world that was destroying his, but she was also alone. She was also fighting the same shadow. He did not know her. He owed her nothing, but he watched. His hands, resting on the smooth wood of his old rifle, were steady. He was a man of the desert, a man of silence and patience. And the desert, he knew, taught one thing above all everything, eventually comes to a head. The dry lightning, the flash flood, the predator's strike. He would wait, and he would watch, and he would be ready. The ride back from town was always the longest. It gave a woman too much time to think, and Mia's thoughts were poor company. The clerk at the general store, Silas Crow's store, had informed her that her credit was no longer good. He had done it politely, his eyes full of a false, oily sympathy that made her want to scrub her skin. 2 weeks. The foreclosure notice had said 14 days. The words echoed with the rhythmic plod of her bay's hooves. 14 days to find a miracle in a land that had run fresh out of them. The sun was a hammer, driving the heat into the cracked earth. She pulled her hat low, the felt damp with sweat. Every rock, every twisted juniper, every rise and fall of the land was a memory of her father. He had taught her this land, taught her to read the bend in the grass, the scrape of a hoof on stone. He had believed in this place. He had poured his strength into it, and the land had taken him. Now it, and the men who coveted it, were coming for what was left. She was so lost in the bitter math of debt and time that she almost missed the sound. It was not a natural sound, not the cry of a hawk or the slip of a lizard. It was a man's voice, a harsh bark of a laugh, cutting through the afternoon stillness. It was followed by a thin, keening wail that made the hairs on her arms stand up. Mia reined in the bay, her heart suddenly loud in her ears. The sounds came from a shallow, dry arroyo just off the main trail, a place thick with brittle-limbed salt cedar and a few dying cottonwoods. She nudged her horse forward, moving off the trail and onto the quieter sand. Her hand went instinctively to the Winchester rifle in the scabbard by her knee, her fingers brushing the cool, worn steel. She crested the low bank of the wash and froze. Down in the sandy basin were 4 men on horseback, men she recognized. Their leader, his bulk clear even at a distance, was Dutch, Silas Crow's foreman. They were circled around a small group of Navajo. 3 of them. An old man, his face a map of deep lines, was on his knees. A woman, younger, was huddled over him, her shoulders shaking with the sound Mia had heard. And then there was the 3rd. He was standing, he was bound, his hands tied tight behind his back. A rope, thick and new, was looped around his neck. The other end had been thrown over the thick, pale branch of a dead cottonwood. He was tall, leaner than the other men, and he stood with a stillness that was unnerving. He had been beaten. Dark bruises marked his face, and a cut was drying on his cheekbone. But his eyes were fixed on Dutch, steady and filled with a contempt so pure it was almost a physical force. It was Taza. She did not know his name, but she knew his face. She had seen him in the hills, a distant, solitary figure, a part of the landscape she had always observed but never approached. Dutch held the coiled end of the rope. He was smiling, enjoying himself. One of the other men, a weaselly one named Pike, laughed again. He said, "What's the matter? Injun you afraid to dance?" "He's a thief, boss," another man said. "We caught him and these others, on Mr. Crow's land." "And Mr. Crow's land," Dutch repeated, savoring the words. He looked at Taza. "Mr. Crow don't like thieves. He don't like trespassers. He likes to make examples. And you look like a fine example." Taza said nothing. He just watched. Mia's stomach turned to ice. This was it. This was the true face of Silas Crow. The face behind the clean shirt and the polite foreclosure notices. This was not law. This was murder, plain and simple, dressed up as frontier justice. Her first overwhelming instinct was to back the horse up, slowly, silently, to ride away, to pretend she had seen nothing. This was not her fight. She had her own. She was one woman, with a rifle she barely knew how to use against 4 men who lived by the gun. To intervene was suicide. She had 14 days. She could not afford to die today. She started to back the bay up, a fraction of an inch at a time. The horse shifted, dislodging a pebble. Taza's head turned, his eyes, dark and piercing, locked with hers. He did not ask for help. He did not plead. He just saw her. He saw her fear, her hesitation, and then he dismissed her, turning his gaze back to Dutch. That dismissal, that silent judgment, stung her worse than an insult. She looked at the woman, weeping over the old man. She looked at the rope, and she thought of her father, of the split cinch. The men who had done that were no different from the men in the wash below. They were all Crow's tools. They were all part of the same cruel, patient machine that was grinding her, and these people, into the dust. The fear did not go away. It stayed, cold and sharp, but something else rose up alongside it, a rage, hot and sudden, that burned away the paralysis. It was the Carter stubbornness, the thing her father had called sand. Before she could second-guess it, before reason could grab the reins, she clicked her tongue and sent the bay walking, steady and deliberate, down the sandy bank into the arroyo. The 4 men turned as one, their hands dropping to their pistols. Their surprise was total. "Well, now," Dutch said, his eyes narrowing. "Look what the wind blew in. It's little Miss Carter." He did not take his hand off the rope. "You're a long way from home, ain't you?" "This ain't for you, missy," Pike sneered, his hand still on his gun. "Go on, shoo." Mia stopped her horse a good 20 yards away, a safe distance. Her hands were shaking, but she forced them to be steady as she drew the heavy Winchester from its scabbard. She did not point it. She laid it across her lap, her thumb resting on the hammer. "Let him go, Dutch," she said. Her voice was not as strong as she had hoped. It came out thin, breathless. Dutch laughed, a low, ugly sound. "Let him go, huh? Now why would I do that? He's a savage. Miss Carter, we found him trespassing on private property. We're just enforcing the law." "You're not the law," Mia said, her voice gaining a little strength. "This is open range. You know it, and I know it." "This land belongs to Mr. Silas Crow," Dutch said, his smile fading. "And he's empowered me to deal with problems as I see fit. This here," he patted the rope, "is a problem. Now I'm telling you for the last time, ride on home. This ain't your concern." He turned his back on her, a deliberate, final insult. He looked up at Taza. "Any last words? Injun?" Taza just stared back, silent. "All right, then." Dutch began to tighten the rope, taking a wrap around his saddle horn. Mia cocked the rifle. The sound, the sharp, metallic click-clack, echoed in the dry air. It was the loudest sound Mia had ever heard. Every man froze. Dutch turned his head, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had not thought she had it in her. "I said." Mia's voice was perfectly clear now, sharp and cold as winter stone. "Let him go." Dutch turned his horse fully to face her. The smile was gone. His face was a mask of cold fury. "You're making a terrible mistake, girl." "The only mistake here is you," Mia said, her heart hammering so hard she felt it in her throat. "You're just a bully with a rope. You've got no badge. You've got no warrant. You've got no right." "I got 4 guns," Dutch snarled. "You got 1. That's all the right I need." "You're right," Mia agreed, and the calmness in her own voice surprised her. "But I'm a witness, a white woman, a landowner's daughter. And you hang him. I'll ride. Not to your tame sheriff in town. I'll ride all the way to the territorial marshal in Prescott. I'll tell him I saw you and your men murder this man in cold blood. I'll tell him you're Silas Crow's hired killers. And even if he's in Crow's pocket too, the papers will get it. It'll bring questions. It'll bring soldiers. Is this one man worth all that? Is that what Silas is paying you for, to bring the whole United States Army down on his head?" She was bluffing. She had no idea if the marshal would listen, if the papers would care. But Dutch did not know that. She could see the calculation in his eyes. He was a foreman, not a general. He was paid to follow orders, to intimidate, to bully. His orders were to harass, to make examples, but killing Daniel Carter's daughter, or creating a scandal that brought federal attention, that was different. That was above his pay. "She's bluffing, boss," Pike said, but his voice was uncertain. "Am I?" Mia said, and for the first time, she raised the rifle. She centered the sight on the middle of Dutch's chest. "My father taught me how to shoot. He told me to hit what I was aiming at. And I'm aiming at you, Dutch. You might get me. One of your men might. But I will get you first. Are you willing to die right here, right now, just to hang a man you don't even know?" Taza had not moved. His eyes were fixed on her. The gaze was no longer dismissive. It was watchful, intense. He was weighing her, just as she was weighing Dutch. The silence stretched. The sun beat down. The only sound was the jingle of a bridle and the buzz of a fly. Dutch stared at her. He saw her gray eyes, as steady and stubborn as her father's. He saw the tremble in her hands, but he also saw the resolve in her jaw. She meant it. The foolish girl actually meant it. He spat a long stream of tobacco juice into the dust. The string of his patience snapped. With a curse, he yanked the rope from Taza's neck, the rough hemp scraping the skin. He threw the coil to the ground. He shoved Taza, a brutal, violent push that sent him staggering back. "Get!" Dutch roared at the Navajo. "Get out of here, all of you, go!" "To his men!" he snarled. "Let's go! This ain't worth it!" The men, looking relieved, wheeled their horses. Dutch was the last. He rode his horse right up to Mia, so close that his knee brushed hers, forcing her to lower the rifle. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. His breath was sour, a stench of whiskey and rage. "You are just as stupid as your old man," he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper. "Stubborn and foolish. He ended up as coyote bait, and you will too. You think this changes anything? You think Crow won't get that ranch? He'll have it. He'll have this whole damn valley. You just bought yourself a whole new world of trouble. Little girl." He straightened up, spurred his horse without another look, and galloped away. His men followed, and in moments they were gone, a receding cloud of angry dust. Mia was left alone in the arroyo. The rifle suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. She lowered it, her arms shaking so violently she almost dropped it. The adrenaline vanished, leaving her weak-kneed and sick to her stomach. The wash was silent. The old man was pushing himself up. The woman was helping him. Her sobs quieted to whimpers. Taza stood where he had been shoved. He rubbed his neck, his face grim. He looked at the rope in the dust, then at Mia. She fumbled the rifle back into its scabbard, her hands clumsy. She did not know what to say. She had just saved a man's life, a man the world called a savage, a man who was her enemy, according to everyone she knew. Taza walked to the old man, spoke to him in their language, his voice low and gentle. He and the woman helped the old man to his feet. He was frail, but he stood with dignity. Then Taza turned to Mia. He walked toward her horse. Mia tensed, her hand still near her sidearm. He stopped a few feet away, just looking up at her. His dark eyes were unreadable. There was no gratitude in them, no smile, but the contempt was gone. It was replaced by something deeper, a profound, unsettling acknowledgement. He saw her. He said nothing. He simply raised his chin in a single sharp nod. It was not thanks. It was a recognition, a bond, unwanted and dangerous, forged in that moment. Then, supporting the old man, the three of them turned and walked away. They did not run. They moved with a steady, unhurried pace up the arroyo and into the maze of shadowed canyons to the east. They did not look back. In seconds, they had vanished, melting back into the landscape as if they were never there. Mia sat on her horse, alone. The only evidence of what had happened was the coiled rope in the dust, lying like a dead rattlesnake. She turned her horse for home. The reality of what she had done settled on her like a shroud. Dutch was right. She had made a terrible mistake. She had just drawn a line in the sand. She had openly, violently, defied Silas Crow. She had chosen a side. And she had done it for a stranger. A deep, cold terror filled her. But beneath it, small and hard and unfamiliar, was a spark, a feeling that, for the first time since her father died, she had not just been surviving. She had fought back. She knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that the fight for her ranch had just become a fight for her life. The silence on the ride home was heavier than the rifle across her lap. It was a silence filled with the echo of Dutch's threat. You just bought yourself a whole new world of trouble. By the time she saw the stone chimneys of her ranch, the brief, hot spark of defiance had cooled, leaving only the cold ash of fear. She had not just saved a man, she realized, likely doomed her ranch. Jed was waiting on the porch, his old joints creakily rising from the steps. His face, weathered as an old boot, was tight with worry. He had heard the horses, seen her ride in, and he knew her face. He knew something was wrong. "Mia, child, you look like you've seen a ghost," he said, his voice a low gravel. "Worse, Jed," she said, swinging down from the bay. Her legs felt weak. "I saw Dutch," she told him, the words tumbling out in a quiet, flat tone that scared the old man more than shouting would have. She told him about the arroyo, the rope, the rifle, and the look on Dutch's face. Jed's leathery skin went pale. He took off his hat and wiped his forehead with a sleeve, a gesture of profound agitation. "Lord have mercy, girl. You didn't, you pointed a gun at Dutch for one of them." "He was a man. Jed, they were going to kill him for no reason." "Reason," Jed spat, though there was more fear than anger in it. Since when does Dutch need a reason or crow Mia? What have you done? That ranch is one thing. That's paper and wood. This is blood. Crow ain't gonna just let this pass. He cannot. You made him and his top man back down. In front of witnesses. He'll tear you apart for that. I know, she whispered. And that was the truth. She knew. You gotta go, Jed said, his voice urgent. Pack a bag. Take the bay and the pack mule. Ride for Prescott. You got kin in California, don't you? Go there. This ranch, it's just land. It ain't worth your life. It was worth my father's, she said, and the simple statement hung between them, unanswerable. I am not running. Jed, this is my home. I will not be scared off it. This ain't brave, Mia, he pleaded. This is just foolhardy. Maybe, she said, pulling the rifle from the scabbard. But it's all I've got. The night was endless. She sat at her father's desk, the ledger book open in front of her. The numbers were meaningless. Just black marks on a page. Every creak of the house, every hoot of an owl, every shift of the wind was the sound of Dutch's boot on her porch. She held a shotgun in her lap, her father's old greener, its barrels smooth and cold. She did not sleep. The sun rose, but it brought no relief. The next 2 days were a torment of waiting. Nothing happened. The silence stretched, thinner and thinner, until Mia thought it would snap. She and Jed took turns riding the perimeter. Their rifles always in hand, they saw nothing. No riders, no cut fences. It was this stillness, this patient, waiting quiet, that was the most terrifying. On the third morning, she rode out to check the north pasture, where her small herd of remaining cattle grazed near the creek. From a distance, she saw them, dark shapes on the ground, unmoving, not grazing, not resting. A cold sickness rose in her throat. She spurred the bay, dread pulling her forward. She found 3 cows, dead, near the water's edge. They were bloated, their eyes wide and staring. They had not been shot. There were no marks on them. She dismounted, her boots sinking into the mud, and knelt by the creek. The water looked clear, but there was a faint, unnatural stillness to it, a lack of insects on its surface. She looked upstream. He wouldn't, she breathed, to poison a creek. That was a crime against the land itself, against everyone, not just her. She was so focused on the water that she did not hear him. When she stood, he was there. Taza stood 20 feet away, on the opposite bank. He was not on a horse. He had appeared from the salt cedars like a wisp of smoke, as silent as the stones around him. Mia's hand flew to her pistol, her heart leaping into her throat. He made no move. He just watched her. His face was unreadable, his dark eyes fixed on the dead cattle, then on her. He was the man from the arroyo. You, she said, her voice a dry rasp. He did not answer. He stepped into the shallow creek, his moccasins sinking into the water, and crossed to her side. He was tall, she realized, taller than she had thought. He moved with a liquid grace that was almost animal. He knelt by one of the dead cows. He looked at its mouth, then at the water. He pointed upstream. He did this, Mia said, her voice shaking with rage. Silas Crow, he poisoned my water. Taza looked at her. He spoke, and his voice was low, with a heavy, rolling cadence. Not just yours. His English was slow, careful. He had learned it at Bosque Redondo, a language of guards and rations, not of conversation. What do you mean? He pointed again, upstream, but also east, toward the high canyons. My springs, my sheep, same. He made a gesture with his hands, a rolling, tumbling motion. Sick, dead. Mia stared at him, the man she had saved. He had come to warn her. Or, no, not to warn her. He had come to confirm what they both already knew. You are the woman who fights. Taza said, it was not a question. It was a statement. He had seen her in the arroyo. I am the woman who is about to lose her ranch, Mia said bitterly, the fear and frustration welling up. I cannot fight him. Not really. He has men. He has the law. He has paper, Taza said, touching the ground with his fingers. The land does not read. He stood and looked at her, a long, appraising look. He was weighing her, just as he had in the wash. He was deciding, "You have sand," he said, using the word her father had used. It startled her. "But you are loud. You walk like a shod horse. You look, but you do not see." "And you do?" Mia shot back, stung by the criticism. "I am here," he said simply. "You did not see me." He was right. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice softer. "Why tell me this?" "Your fight," he said, tapping his own chest, "is my fight. This man, Crow, he eats the land. He will not stop with your water. He will not stop with my springs. He will eat until all is desert. All is his." An alliance. He was offering an alliance. The idea was absurd. A white woman, a cattleman's daughter, and a Navajo warrior. The town would lynch her if they knew. Jed was right. This was madness. But as she looked at the dead cattle, at the silent, knowing man before her, she felt a dawning realization. The normal world, the world of banks and sheriffs and laws, had already failed her. It was a lie, a thin crust over the raw, brutal power of men like Crow. Jed's caution was the logic of the defeated. This man, Taza, he was not defeated. He was something else. "What do we do?" she asked. That was the beginning. He did not come to her ranch. She met him in the hills, in the secret places. He became her shadow teacher. He taught her the land she thought she knew, showed her a different map, a map of secret springs, of hidden game trails, of canyons that could hide her remaining herd. "You must move," he said one afternoon, as they lay on their bellies on a high rim rock, looking down at the valley. "Move your cows, not here. He will send men. They will run them off." "Where?" He pointed to a thin, jagged crack in the far cliffs. "There, the canyon with no name, water inside, grass. They will not find them." It took 2 days, 2 days of her and Jed, with Taza as a silent, watchful guide, pushing the last 40 head of Carter cattle up into the high, broken country. It was exhausting, brutal work. Taza moved like a phantom, scouting ahead, vanishing and reappearing. He showed her how to use the rocks to hide their trail, how to move the cattle at night so they raised no dust. Mia, to her own surprise, learned. She was a quick study. She had lived on this land all her life, but he was teaching her its language. She learned to read the bend of a branch, the dislodged pebble. She learned to listen, to distinguish the sound of a man's horse from a wild mustang. She learned the profound, bone-deep patience of the hunter. As she learned, her respect for him grew. He was not the savage of her childhood stories. He was a man of quiet, powerful intelligence. He knew the name of every plant, the habits of every animal. He moved with a purpose and a deep, abiding connection to the world that she, with her deeds and fences, had only ever skimmed the surface of. And she saw his sadness. It was in his eyes when he looked at the mountains, his sacred zill. It was in the way he touched a small, broken pot he found near a spring, a relic of his people. He had lost, just as she had lost, his family, his world. Their shared grief was an unspoken thing between them, a bond deeper than words. Taza, in turn, watched her. He saw her stubbornness, the way she refused to quit, even when her hands were bloody and her face was gray with exhaustion. He saw her swallow her pride and listen. He saw the fire in her, the same fire he had seen in the arroyo. He had expected a soft Bilagana woman. He found a warrior, in her own way. The suspicion in his eyes began to change, replaced by a grudging, then a genuine respect. One evening, they were resting in the hidden canyon, the cattle safely grazing on the high, sweet grass. The sun was setting, painting the canyon walls in hues of fire and deep purple. "You saved me," he said, his voice quiet. He had not spoken of that day before. "Why?" Mia looked at her hands. "I do not know. Because it was wrong. Because I am tired of men like that winning." "Winning," he repeated. "They have many guns, much paper." "They do," Mia said. "But we have this." She touched the canyon wall. "They do not know this place. They do not know this land, not like you do." Taza looked at her, and for the first time, she saw the shadow of something else in his eyes. Not just respect, something warmer. "No," he said, "not like we do." The test of their new alliance came a few days later. They were scouting a ridge overlooking the main trail, watching for patrols. Pike and another of Crow's men were riding below, their rifles loose in their saddles. They were drunk, or close to it, laughing loudly and taking swigs from a bottle. "Let's check that north pasture again," Pike said, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "Dutch wants those last cows. Says we can have some fun with them before we run them off." "What about the girl?" the other man asked. "Dutch says she's to be handled. He wants her scared, good and scared." Pike's laugh was ugly. "I can scare her." Mia went cold. She shifted, dislodging a small cascade of pebbles. Down below, Pike reined in. "What was that?" He and the other man raised their rifles, their eyes scanning the rocks. They were directly below Mia and Taza, who were hidden in a shallow cleft, a small overhang of rock. Mia's heart stopped. She did not breathe. Taza put a hand on her arm. It was not a gesture of comfort. It was a command. Still, his body was pressed against hers in the narrow space, a solid, living wall. She could feel the heat of him, smell the faint, clean scent of sage and dust. Pike squinted up at the ridge. He was 20 yards from their hiding place. He could not see them, but a nervous horse or another sound would bring him right to them. Taza, moving with liquid slowness, his eyes never leaving Pike, picked up a stone the size of his fist. In one smooth, powerful motion, he lobbed it, not down, but sideways, far along the ridge. The stone clattered and bounced, a loud crashing sound in the silence. "There!" Pike yelled, wheeling his horse. "Over there! Probably a coyote." He and the other man spurred their horses, galloping toward the sound, eager for a target. Mia and Taza remained frozen. They watched the men ride into the maze of rocks. Farther and farther away, they were safe. Mia let out a breath she did not know she was holding. Her entire body was shaking. She was still pressed against Taza, her cheek almost against his shoulder. She was acutely aware of his hand, still on her arm, his fingers strong and warm. She pulled back slowly. "Thank you," she whispered. Taza did not move. He was still watching the disappearing riders. His face was grim. "They will be back. They will not stop." "I know." He turned his head, his dark eyes meeting hers. They were inches apart. The suspicion was gone. The respect was there. But so was the spark they had both seen in the canyon. The warmth. It was a shared understanding. A sudden, powerful current that ran between them. They were no longer a white woman and a Navajo man. They were allies. They were two people, alone, against a force that would destroy them both. And in that desolate, dangerous land, they had just found the only thing that might save them each other. The quiet of the high canyon was a world away from the valley. Up here, with the last of her cattle, Mia felt a fragile, temporary safety. She had been moving them, with Taza's help, from one hidden pasture to another, never staying in one place for more than a day. Jed, his rheumatism screaming in protest, kept watch at the ranch, a lonely, defiant sentinel. The foreclosure was now less than a week away. The time for hiding was running out. She was riding back to the ranch, her body aching with a weariness that went bone deep, when she saw the smoke. It was not a campfire. It was a thick, greasy column of black, rising from the exact spot where her home should be. "No," she whispered, the word a prayer. "No, no, no!" She spurred the bay into a reckless, frantic gallop, her heart a cold, hard fist in her chest. She burst from the canyon mouth and onto the open plain, and the world fell away. Her barn was a volcano of orange flame, the roof already collapsing inward in a shower of sparks. The house was being torn apart, even from a half-mile away. She could see them. Dutch, Pike, a dozen of Crow's men. They were not trying to be quiet. This was not a raid, it was an execution. They were systematically smashing every window. One man was on the porch, using a sledgehammer on her mother's rocking chair, splintering it to kindling. They were carrying furniture out onto the lawn, the dining table her father had built, the sideboard, her mother's linen chest, and adding it to a bonfire. A terrible, guttural sound was torn from her throat. She reined in the bay, her hand dropping to her rifle. But she was one. They were 12. This was not the arroyo. This was not a bluff she could win. Then she saw Jed. He was on the ground, near the well. He was not moving. Mia lost her mind. She screamed, a raw, wordless cry of pure rage and grief, and spurred the bay forward, firing the rifle from her hip, the shot going wild. It was a fool's charge. Two of the men turned, their rifles coming up. A bullet whined past her ear. Another struck the ground in front of her, spraying her with dirt. Dutch stepped off the porch. He did not even draw his gun. He just watched her come, a look of bored amusement on his face. "That's far enough. Miss Carter," he boomed, his voice carrying over the roar of the fire. She hauled on the reins, the bay rearing in protest, its eyes wide with fear of the flames. "Jed!" she screamed, frantic. "What did you do to him?" "He's just resting," Dutch said with a grin. "Old man took a fall. Now, you sit right there and watch. Mister, Crow wanted you to have a good view. He's a thoughtful man." She was helpless, sobbing in rage and terror. She watched as they finished their work. They were thorough. They broke what they did not burn. They tore down the section of fence by the corral. They were not just evicting her. They were erasing her. They were wiping her, and her father's memory, from the land. When they were done, the barn was a smoking skeleton. The house was a hollowed-out shell, its windows like vacant eyes. The front lawn was a smoldering pyre of her family's life. Dutch mounted his horse. He rode over to her, leisurely, as if on a Sunday visit. He stopped a few feet away. "Foreclosures in 5 days," he said, his voice conversational. "But Mr. Crow, he figured you might not want to wait. He's canceled your debt. The land is his. This is his payment for all the trouble you caused." He leaned forward. "He told me to tell you that he don't want to see you in this valley come morning. He don't care where you go, but if you're here, he'll have the sheriff arrest you for trespassing. And if you fight that well, you've seen what we do to fighters." He looked over at Jed, who had stirred, moaning. "He'll live, this time, but you ain't got no one, girl. You're alone, your neighbors. They think you're a disgrace. Your fancy friends, they ain't here. It's over. You lost." He tipped his hat, the gesture a profound, final mockery, and wheeled his horse. "Let's ride, boys." He and his men galloped away, laughing, leaving her alone in the ruins of her life, the sound of their triumph swallowed by the crackle of the flames. She fell from the horse. She ran to Jed, her legs shaking. He was conscious, barely. His left arm was bent at a terrible angle, and his face was a swollen, bloody mask. "Mia," he rasped. They come so fast." "Shh, Jed, do not talk. We have to get you out of here." She did not know how she did it. She hauled him onto her horse, hissing in pain with every movement. She mounted behind him, holding him upright, and turned her back on the burning ranch. She rode, not toward the town, but toward the high canyons, toward the only safety she had left. Taza found them at dusk. He had seen the smoke. And he had come. He found her at the mouth of the hidden canyon, bathing Jed's face with water from her canteen. The old man was delirious with pain. Taza's face, when he saw Jed, when he looked back at the plume of smoke staining the sunset, was a mask of cold, controlled fury. He said nothing. He slid from his pony and went to Jed's side. He examined the arm, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Broken," he said. He looked at Mia. Her face was streaked with soot and tears. Her eyes were hollowed out, dark with shock and a grief so deep it had no voice. He left, vanishing into the twilight. He returned an hour later with a handful of leaves and some strips of fresh bark. He chewed the leaves into a poultice and applied it to Jed's worst cuts. Then, with 2 flat, strong pieces of wood from a broken crate he'd found, he set Jed's arm. Jed screamed, a thin, sharp sound, and then passed out. "He will sleep," Taza said. He built a small, smokeless fire, a skill she still had not mastered. He sat back on his heels, watching the flames. He looked at Mia, who was just sitting, staring into the fire, her arms wrapped around her knees, shaking. "He burned it all," she whispered. "Everything, my father's desk, my mother's, it is all gone. He won. Dutch was right. I am alone." "No," Taza said, his voice quiet but fierce. "You are not alone. You are here. Here I am, hiding in a cave. I have nothing. I am a trespasser on my own land." "He burned wood," Taza said, his voice sharp, cutting through her despair. "He broke glass. He cannot burn the land. He cannot burn the mountain. He did not break you." "He did," she whispered. "He did." "No." He moved, kneeling in front of her. He took her chin in his hand, his fingers rough but steady, forcing her to look at him. His dark eyes were burning. "This is fear. I know this fear. I lived it. They burned our hogans. They killed our sheep. They drove us from our homes. They took everything." His gaze softened. "Just a fraction. But they did not take us. We are still here, and you are still here." He let her go. He stood, a tall, dark silhouette against the firelight. "This is not the end. This is the beginning. Now you have nothing to lose." His words echoed what she'd been thinking. The fear was still there, but it was changing. The cold, paralytic dread was burning away, leaving something else, a hard, pure, white, hot anger. She had lost everything. Her home, her legacy, her past. All that was left was the future, and the man who had taken it from her. She had to go to town. Jed needed medicine, things Taza's poultices could not fix. She left him in Taza's care and rode in, keeping to the back trails. She entered redemption not as Mia Carter, landowner, but as a refugee. The town knew. The news had traveled faster than a prairie fire. As she walked her horse down the main street, the few people out in the morning heat stopped to stare. Their faces were not kind. There was no sympathy. There was fear, and there was blame. Mrs. Henderson, whose son Mia had played with as a child, saw her coming, turned her back, and abruptly went back inside her husband's blacksmith shop. Mr. Gable, the storekeeper at the Mercantile, not Crow's store, but the smaller, independent one, looked through her as she walked in. "I need laudanum, Mr. Gable," she said, her voice quiet, "and bandages." He placed the items on the counter, his face stony. "That will be $4. It was an outrageous price. $4. You know my credit is—" "Your credit is nothing," he said, his voice low and hostile. "You have no ranch, Miss Carter. You have no collateral. Cash only." He knew. They all knew. Crow had won. "Please, Mr. Gable," she whispered. "My man, Jed, he's hurt badly." "I heard you were running with those red savages," he said, not looking at her. "Heard you pulled a gun on Dutch for one of them. What did you think was going to happen? You bring this on yourself, girl. You play with fire. You get burned. You lie down with dogs. You get fleas. He's a man, Mr. Gable, Mia said, her voice shaking with the effort of control. He's trouble, and you brought that trouble right to our doorstep. Crow is the law here. He's progress, and you're just in the way. She paid the $4. It was almost the last of the money she had. She walked out, her head high, though she felt like crumbling. As she mounted her horse, Sheriff Brody stepped out of his office. He was a portly man, his badge a small, dull star on a stained vest. He, too, was in Crow's pocket. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice holding a false note of concern. "I was just about to ride out. I heard there was an unfortunate fire at your property." "It was not a fire, Sheriff," Mia said, her voice dead. "It was arson, and you know who did it." The sheriff's eyes hardened. "Now, that's a serious accusation. You got proof of that. You got witnesses." "I am a witness. You're an interested party," he said smoothly. "Dutch and his men, they were all in the saloon last night. I saw them myself, played a hand of cards with them. They could not have been out at your place." The lie was so bold, so complete. It took her breath away. They had an alibi, a fabricated, ironclad alibi from the law itself. "As for the fire," the sheriff continued, "I'm ruling it an accident, probably your old chimney, or a stray spark from your cook stove. And since the property has been foreclosed on by Mr. Crow, well, it's his loss, really, not yours. You were trespassing." "I what?" "Foreclosure came through this morning. Emergency writ. Judge signed it. Seems you'd abandoned the property. Mr. Crow is a man who likes to protect his investments." It was all a lie. A neat, tidy, legal lie that erased her entirely. "I am warning you, Miss Carter," the sheriff said, his voice no longer pleasant. "You are not welcome in this valley. You are a disruptive element. You associate with known hostiles. I am giving you 24 hours to be clear of this county. After that, I will arrest you for vagrancy. Do you understand me?" Mia stared at him. The man her father had once shared a drink with. The man who was supposed to uphold the law. He was just another one of Crow's puppets. She did not say a word. She just turned her horse and rode away, the sheriff's smug, cold eyes on her back. She rode back to the canyon. She felt empty, burned out, just like her home. When she returned, Taza was waiting. He had news of his own. His face was grim. Crow's men had not just been busy at her ranch, while Dutch was burning her home. Pike and others had ridden into the eastern canyons. They had found a small encampment of Navajo, mostly women, children, and old ones. Taza's people. They had destroyed the camp, scattered their flock of sheep, and fouled their winter stores. They drove them out, Taza said, his voice raw with a pain he could not hide. "My uncle's wife. She is old. She fell. She did not get up. They left her." Mia looked at him, and her own burned-out grief was suddenly eclipsed by his. He had lost his home, his food, his family. His people were now being hunted, starving, with winter coming. All because of her. "This is my fault," she whispered, the guilt a crushing weight. "I defied them. I saved you, and now all of this." "No." Taza's voice was like stone. "This is his fault. Crow, he does this because he is a chindi, a ghost of greed. He was doing this long before the arroyo. He poisoned the water. Remember, he poisoned my spring. This was always coming." He looked at her, and his eyes were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of a warrior who had just been handed his cause. "He thinks we are broken," Taza said. "He thinks he has won. He thinks we are scattered, like dry leaves." Mia stood up. The emptiness inside her was gone. The cold anger was all that remained. She thought of her father. She thought of Jed, lying in the cave. She thought of Taza's aunt, left to die in the rocks. "You are right," she said, her voice hoarse. "He thinks he has won. He has the law. He has the town. He has the guns. He has my land. He has left us with nothing." She walked to the mouth of the cave and looked out at the valley. Her valley, now owned by a monster. "But he left us each other," she said, so quietly Taza barely heard her. She turned back to him, and her eyes were clear and hard and full of a terrible, unwavering light. "I am not running, Taza. I will not be driven out. If he wants this land, he will have to kill me for it, and I will not make it easy." The high canyon was a cold cradle. Jed, lying on a bed of saddle blankets, was worse. The laudanum Mia had bought was long gone, and the old man's breath was a shallow, wet rattle in his chest. The fever made his eyes glassy. He was trapped in a haze of pain, muttering about old cattle drives, about her father, about a world that was already gone. Mia watched him, her heart a cold knot of guilt. She had saved him from Dutch's beating only to bring him here to die slowly. Taza sat by the small, hidden fire. He had been gone for a day, scouting, checking on the remnants of his own people. He returned with nothing. His face was a mask of granite. "The old woman," he said, his voice flat. "My uncle's wife. She is gone. The cold took her." Mia closed her eyes. Another death. Another ghost to lay at Silas Crow's door. "Jed, he is burning up," she whispered, dipping a rag in the water bucket. The water was low. "He needs a doctor. He needs real medicine." "My people need food," Taza said. "The sheep are scattered. The stores are fouled. We are starving. Mia, you and I, we are good at hiding, but the old and the sick they cannot hide. They just die." He stood. The decision was in his eyes before he spoke it. "I am going," he said. "Going where, Taza? No, you cannot. They are hunting you." "I am going to the town," he said, as if it were the simplest thing. "Crow's store. He has food. He has medicine. He owes us this. I am a shadow. They will not see me. I will take what he has stolen from us." "It is a trap," she pleaded, standing to face him. "Taza, that is what he wants. He knows we are still out here. He is waiting. He will not just let us be. He will bait a trap." "Then it is a trap," Taza said, his voice quiet, final. "We can die here, watching him." He nodded at Jed. "Fade away. We can die in these hills, hearing my people weaken. Or we can die fighting. I am dying. We do not die quiet." He touched her arm, his fingers brushing her sleeve. It was a brief, painful goodbye. "Keep him warm." Before she could argue again, he was gone. He did not walk away. He simply melted into the rocks and the deepening twilight. Mia was left with the sound of Jed's breathing and the terrible, screaming silence of her own fear. She waited. Every hour was a lifetime. She tended to Jed. She walked to the mouth of the cave. She stared at the distant, faint yellow lights of redemption, a town that hated her. He did not return. The sun rose, and the dread that had been a cold pool in her stomach turned to a sharp, stabbing certainty. He was caught. She could not stay. She could not wait. Jed was unconscious, his breathing faint. He was beyond her help now. Leaving him was the hardest thing she had ever done. She whispered a promise to his unhearing ear, mounted the bay, and rode. Not fast, but careful, keeping to the low ridges toward the town. She did not ride in. She tied the horse in a cluster of mesquite a half-mile out and crept forward on foot, her rifle in her hand. She climbed a low bluff that overlooked the main street, and she saw it. The whole town was there. It was not a busy morning. It was a spectacle. A thick beam had been laid across the posts of the saloon's covered porch. A new rope was slung over it. Below it, on his own horse, sat Taza. His hands were tied. His face was swollen and bruised. Dutch must have enjoyed himself, but he sat tall. He did not look at the crowd. He looked east, at the mountains. Dutch was there, holding the reins of Taza's horse. Pike was there, his rifle cradled, keeping the crowd back, and Silas Crow was there, standing on the porch, a wool suit on his back, a cup of coffee in his clean hand. He was smiling. He was addressing the town. "Citizens of Redemption," Crow announced, his voice smooth and clear. "We are gathered here today for justice. This creature, this savage, was caught last night. Caught in the act of thievery, stealing food and medicine from my store. Food meant for you, medicine meant for your families." A low murmur of anger ran through the crowd. "This is the man who has been terrorizing our valley," Crow continued, his voice rising, playing them like a fiddle. "This is the man who consorts with the vagrant, Mia Carter, the woman who burned her own ranch for spite. They are a plague. And today, we cut out the infection." Mia's blood went cold. He was twisting everything. He was making Taza the villain, making her the monster. "He is a trespasser, a thief, and a hostile," Crow declared. "And the law in this territory is clear. The penalty is death. Sheriff, do your duty." Sheriff Brody, his face pale and sweaty, nodded. Dutch, his grin wide, moved to Taza's horse. He uncoiled the slack from the rope and prepared to tie it to his own saddle horn. This was it, the arroyo, all over again. But this time there was no bluff. There was a crowd. There was a gallows. There was no escape. Mia looked at Taza. He had heard her. He had known she would be there. His head turned, and his eyes, bruised but clear, found her on the bluff. He saw her, and he did not ask for help. He just looked at her, a long, final look, and he nodded. Once. The same nod he had given her in the arroyo. A recognition, a goodbye. Something inside her, the last civilized, frightened part of her, broke, the part that said to hide, to run, to survive. It snapped. She stood up. She walked out from the rocks, onto the main road, the rifle held loose at her side. The crowd turned, a wave of whispers. "It is her, the Carter girl." Silas Crow saw her. His smile faltered. His eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in pure, unadulterated hatred. She was ruining his moment. "Well, well," Crow said, recovering. "The other half of the plague? Come to watch, Mia, or to join him, Sheriff. Arrest her." Mia kept walking, her boots raising small puffs of dust. She stopped at the edge of the crowd, 50 feet from the porch. "Do not hang him!" she yelled. Her voice was not a plea. It was a command. The crowd went silent. Dutch stopped, his hand on the rope. Taza watched her. "Do not hang him," she repeated, her voice shaking but carrying in the dead still air. Crow laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "You are in no position to demand anything, girl. You are a wanted woman, a vagrant." "I will buy him first," she screamed, the words torn from her. This caused a stir. Mr. Gable was there, Mr. Henderson, the blacksmith, their wives. They looked at her, then at Crow. This was not justice. This was becoming a circus. "Buy him," Crow mocked, spreading his soft hands. "With what your father's ashes, the dust in your pockets, you have nothing." She took a step forward. She looked past Crow. She looked at the people who had known her since she was a child. "He says this man is filthy," she cried, pointing at Taza. "He calls him a savage. Call him filthy. I do not care. Call him filthy, but his hands hold worth." Her voice cracked, raw with emotion. "His hands have more worth than that man's," she pointed at Crow. "His hands know how to heal the sick. His hands know how to find water. His hands know how to build, how to live on this land you are all so afraid of. What do his hands know?" she screamed, pointing at Silas. "They know how to light a match. They know how to sign a false paper. They know how to poison a creek, your creek." A new murmur, a different one. "She is right, Silas." Mr. Henderson, the blacksmith, said, his voice a low rumble. My pasture, my cows are sick. I thought it was the heat. But it is your land, up from mine. It is the Carter Creek." "He burned her out, Mrs." Henderson whispered loud enough for all to hear. "We all knew it. We were just too afraid to say." "This is madness," Crow roared, his face turning a dark red. "She is a liar. She is addled, Sheriff. Do your job. Hang this man." "No!" Mia screamed. "If you hang him, you are all murderers. You are all just as bad as he is. You know what he did to my father. You know what he did to my home. And you let him. You let him because you were scared. Are you still scared? Are you going to let him kill this man, too, just because he says so?" She had them. The fear of Crow was being eclipsed by the fear of their own conscience and the very real terror of a poisoned valley. Crow saw it. He saw the shift. He saw the doubt in their eyes. He was losing them. His power was built on their fear, and she was unraveling it with plain, simple truth. "He was stealing," Crow yelled, desperate. "He was taking what you stole," Mia yelled back. "He was taking medicine for my man, Jed, who your men beat half to death. He was taking food for his people, who your men drove into the desert to starve. He is not the thief here. Silas Crow, you are." The crowd was a low, angry growl. They were closing in, no longer a passive audience. Crow, in a panic, pulled his pistol. The small, silver gun looked like a toy. "This is my town. I brought the capital. I am the law, Dutch. Hang him. Hang him now." Dutch looked at Crow. He looked at the 50 angry faces of the townspeople, hands on their own hips, on their own guns. He looked at the blacksmith, who was holding a hammer. Dutch was a bully, not a fool. He was not paid enough to fight an entire town. He dropped the rope. You! Crow sputtered, his mask of civilization gone, his face a contortion of pure rage. He had lost his spectacle. He had lost his power. "Fine," he shrieked. "Fine. You want him. You want this disease. Fine, Sheriff. Put him in the cell. Put him in the cell. We will have a trial, a legal trial. That is what you want. That is what you will get. Now get out. All of you. Get out." He turned, his suit immaculate, his face monstrous, and stormed into the saloon. The spell was broken. Dutch, disgusted, cut Taza's bonds. He shoved him roughly toward the sheriff. "Get in the jail." Sheriff Brody, looking terrified, grabbed Taza's arm and hustled him into the small office, locking the cell door. The crowd began to disperse. Quiet now, shaken. They looked at Mia. They did not speak to her, but their eyes were different. The hostility was gone. In its place was fear, and something new. Awe, respect. Mia stood, shaking, the rifle heavy in her hand. She had won. She had saved his life. But Taza was still a prisoner, and Silas Crow was still in power. That night, she slipped back into the town. It was a ghost town. Everyone behind locked doors, waiting to see what would happen next. The sheriff's office was dark, except for a single lamp. She moved around the back, to the small, barred window of the cell. She was a shadow, just as Taza had taught her. "Taza," she whispered. A shape detached itself from the darkness. He came to the window. His bruised face was close to hers, separated only by the bars. "You are loud," he whispered. It was not a complaint. It was a statement of wonder. "It worked," she breathed, her fingers finding the cold iron. "For today. He will still kill me," Taza said. His voice was flat. "A trial is just a slower rope. Crow owns the judge." "I know," she said. "I am getting you out." "Jed?" he asked. "And my people?" I do not know. Jed was weak. I had to leave him." "Taza," her voice broke. "I was so scared." "I know." He reached his fingers through the bars. He did not touch her face or her hair. He found her hand where it was gripping the window frame. He covered it with his own. His skin was rough, warm. It was a touch that was more real, more grounding than anything she had ever felt. "You should not have come," he whispered. "I had to." She pressed her face against the bars, needing to be closer. "Taza, when I saw that rope." "You have the heart of a warrior," he said, his voice rough. "A dying heart." "They will kill you," she said, a single tear escaping, tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. I cannot lose you, too. I cannot." "You have not lost me," he said, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. The simple, small movement sent a shock through her. "When I was on that horse, I was not afraid. I saw you, and I was home." "Taza," she breathed. "You are my heart, Mia Carter. You spoke for me. Now, you must go. Go back to Jed. Go to my people." "No," she said, her voice fierce, pulling back. Her hand was still wrapped in his. "I am not leaving you. I am getting you out. And then we end this. We end him." She heard a boot scrape on the boardwalk out front. "The sheriff?" She squeezed Taza's hand. "Be ready." She pulled her hand from his, the loss of his warmth and actual pain. She slipped back into the shadows. A ghost, but she was not a ghost. She was a woman. She had a purpose, and for the first time in her life, she was not alone. The promise, "Be ready," was a stone in her gut. She slipped away from the jail, her mind racing. She could not break him out alone. The sheriff was awake, and Dutch or Pike would be close, guarding Crow's new prize. To storm the jail was suicide, but to wait for the trial was just a slower execution. She needed leverage. She needed help. She ran back to the mesquite grove, her breath tearing at her lungs, and mounted the bay. She did not ride for the canyon. Jed was beyond her help. She knew that. A cold, hard grief she had to wall away for now. She rode east, into the high, broken country, toward the place Taza had pointed, the place his scattered people were hiding. It took her hours. She found them in a deep, wind-scoured box canyon. It was a place of profound misery. There were perhaps 15 of them, mostly old men, women, and a few hollow-eyed children. They had no fire, no shelter but the shallow overhangs of the rock. Their faces were gaunt, etched with starvation and despair. When she rode in, they scattered, fear making them weak. An old man, his face a web of wrinkles, stood his ground, holding a simple bow. "I am Mia Carter," she said, holding her hands up, open and empty. "I am Taza's friend." The name was a key. The fear in their eyes did not vanish, but it was joined by a flicker of curiosity. A woman with hair the color of Taza's, his aunt's sister, stepped forward. Her eyes were hard. "Taza is dead," the woman said, her voice a dry rasp. "No," Mia said, swinging down from her horse. "He is alive. He is a prisoner. Silas Crow has him in the town jail. He plans to kill him, to stage a legal hanging." The woman's face hardened further. "Then he is dead." "No!" Mia's voice was fierce, the same fire she had found in the town square. "He is alive, but I need your help. I cannot free him alone. And you cannot live here. You are dying. Crow did this to you. He poisoned your water. He scattered your sheep. He killed the old ones. And now he has your warrior, your protector." She looked at the small, ragged group. "Taza told me, you are dying. You do not die quiet. Hiding here is a slow death. Crow has won. He has beaten you." "We have no guns," the old man with the bow said, his voice a whisper. "We have no food. We are not warriors. We are ghosts." "No," Mia said, walking toward them. "You are his people. And the town is afraid. I spoke, and they listened. They are afraid of Crow. Yes, but they are also afraid of his poison. They are afraid of him. He is not as strong as he looks. His power is a lie. And I proved it. If we go now, all of us, and stand in that town, they will have to choose. They will not let him murder Taza in front of women and children, and they will not let him murder you." It was a desperate, insane gamble. She was asking starving, beaten people to walk into the camp of their enemy. The woman looked at Mia, a long, searching gaze. She saw the soot on Mia's face, the desperate sincerity in her eyes. "You are the woman who speaks," the woman said, nodding slowly. "Taza spoke of you. He said you have a dying heart." "Then help me," Mia pleaded. "Help me save him. Help me save yourselves." The woman looked at the old man. He nodded. "It is a good day to die," he said, and he straightened his back. They came, not all of them, but the woman, the old man, and 4 others who could walk. They were weak, but their eyes were alive. They followed her, a small, ragged band, back toward redemption. They reached the town just before dawn. The town was asleep, a false, nervous peace. Mia posted the Navajo at the end of the street, in the shadows. "Wait," she told them. "When you hear the shot, come." "What shot?" the woman asked. "My shot," Mia said. She did not go to the jail. She went to the blacksmith shop. A light was on in the back. She knocked, hard. Mr. Henderson opened the door, a shotgun in his hands. When he saw her, his face was a mixture of fear and relief. "Miss Carter." "I need your help," she said, her voice low and fast. "Crow has Taza in the jail. He will kill him. You know he will. You know he poisoned the water. You know he burned my home. You know he is a murderer." "What can I do?" Henderson said, his knuckles white on the shotgun. "He has the sheriff. He has Dutch." "I am getting Taza out," she said. "But Crow will come. He will bring his men. And this time, the town cannot just watch. You have to stand with me. You, Mr. Gable, all the others. When the shooting starts, you have to choose a side. Publicly. He cannot fight the whole town." Henderson looked at his wife, who was standing in the doorway, her face pale. She nodded at him. "All right," Henderson said, his voice a low growl. "He poisoned my cattle. He threatened this town long enough. We stand with you." "Good," Mia said. "Now, give me that sledgehammer, the heavy one." She walked to the sheriff's office. It was dark. The sheriff was asleep at his desk, his boots up, his hat over his eyes. Mia, moving with the silence Taza had taught her, crept past the open door. The keys were on a hook on the wall. She grabbed them. She went to the cell. Taza was on his feet, waiting. He had known she would come. She fumbled with the key, her hands shaking. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Taza stepped out. He did not speak. He took the heavy sledgehammer from her hand. "Sheriff Brody!" Mia yelled, her voice a clarion call. The sheriff jolted awake, his chair crashing to the floor. He saw Taza, free, holding the hammer. He saw Mia in the doorway. He fumbled for his pistol. Mia fired her rifle. The shot was not aimed at him. It was aimed at the ceiling. The explosion was deafening in the small room. Plaster rained down. "That is the signal," she said, as much to Taza as to the sheriff. Outside, she heard a cry, the wail of the Navajo, a high, thin, terrifying sound. What in God's name?" the sheriff stammered. "The town is rising, Sheriff," Mia said, her voice cold, "and you are on the wrong side." Taza pushed past her, out into the pre-dawn light. The street was no longer empty. The Navajo, all 7 of them, were walking down the center of the street, a ragged, defiant line. From the other end, Mr. Henderson and Mr. Gable and 3 other townsmen were emerging from their shops, carrying rifles. A light flared in the window of the saloon's upper floor. "Silas Crow." "Taza," Mia said. "He will bring his men." "I am ready," Taza said. He gripped the sledgehammer. It was a poor weapon against a rifle, but in his hands, it looked deadly. The doors of the saloon burst open. Dutch, Pike, and 6 other hired guns spilled out onto the porch. fanning out, their rifles ready. And then Silas Crow emerged. He was not wearing a suit. He was in his shirt sleeves, his hair undone, the mask was gone. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a manic, cornered rage. "What is this?" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Brody, arrest them! Arrest them all! This is an insurrection!" Sheriff Brody stumbled out of his office, his hands high in the air. I ain't in this. Silas, this is between you and them." "Hey, you coward!" Crow shrieked. He pointed at Mia. You did this. I will destroy you." "Your days of destroying are over, Crow," Mia called out, her voice clear. She and Taza stood side by side in the middle of the street. "Look around you. You have no power here. The sheriff has quit you. The town is against you. It is over." "Over?" Crow laughed, a high, thin, hysterical sound. "Over Dutch Pike. Kill them all. Start with her." Dutch did not hesitate. He raised his rifle. A shot rang out, but it was not from Dutch. It was from Henderson. The blacksmith's shot went wide, splintering the porch post next to Dutch's head. "Not in my town, Crow!" Henderson roared. The street exploded. It was not a battle. It was a brawl. Dutch's men opened fire. The townsmen fired back. It was chaos, smoke and shouting and the whine of ricochets. Taza grabbed Mia's arm. "Not in the open, the alley." He pulled her toward the narrow gap between the sheriff's office and the general store. A bullet tore a chunk of wood from the door frame where she had been standing. They crouched behind a stack of barrels. Pike and another man were trying to flank them, firing from the cover of a water trough. "This is bad," Mia breathed, reloading her Winchester, her hands shaking. "Taza, there are too many." "We stay. We fight," he said, his eyes scanning, assessing. He saw Dutch, further down the street, not firing but running. He was running toward the land office. "He is going for the papers," Taza snarled. "The deeds, the proof." Taza knew, as Mia knew, that without those false deeds, Crow's legal claim on the valley evaporated. At that exact moment, from the roof of the saloon, a seventh man, one they had not seen, leaned over the edge. He had a clear shot. He was not aiming at Taza. He was aiming at Mia. Taza saw him. He saw the glint of the rifle, the man taking aim. In that same instant, he saw Dutch reach the door of the land office, fumbling for his keys. It was a choice, stark and brutal, in the space of a heartbeat. The land or the woman. The proof that could save his people, or the heart that had saved his. He did not hesitate. He did not shout a warning. He did not fire. He threw his entire body at Mia, a desperate, lunging tackle. "Taza!" she screamed, as he hit her, his weight driving the breath from her, both of them tumbling backward into the dust and grime of the alley. A rifle cracked. The bullet, aimed for her heart, slammed into the wooden barrel they had been hiding behind, shattering it, sending a spray of water and splinters everywhere. Taza rolled, coming up onto his knees, pulling her with him. He was over her, a shield. He had the sledgehammer in one hand, but his eyes were on her, wild with fear. Are you hurt?" "No!" she gasped, her heart hammering from the fall, from the fear, from him. You saved me!" He had chosen her. He had let Dutch go, let the proof go, to save her life. From the street, a cry. The old Navajo man, the one with the bow, had seen the man on the roof. An arrow, fletched with hawk feathers, was now protruding from the man's chest. He dropped his rifle, his body slumping over the false front of the saloon. The tide had turned. The townsmen, enraged, were pressing forward. Dutch, seeing his men fall, gave up on the land office and ran, disappearing behind the buildings. Silas Crow, his face a mask of disbelief, was alone on the porch. He looked at the dead, at the townsmen advancing. He looked at Mia and Taza, emerging from the alley. He was beaten, His army was gone. His power was broken. He raised his little silver pistol, his hands shaking. "I am Silas Crow." Taza stepped in front of Mia. He took a step toward the porch. "It is over," Taza said. Crow looked at the dark, imposing warrior. He looked at the woman beside him. He looked at the angry faces of the town. His empire, built on paper and fear, had been undone by a girl and a savage. He put the pistol to his own temple. "No!" Mia screamed. But it was too late. The shot was small, almost insignificant. In the sudden silence of the street, Silas Crow crumpled to the porch, his reign ending not in a blaze of glory, but in a small, pathetic heap. The single, small shot was cannon loud in the sudden, echoing silence. The street, which seconds before had been a storm of smoke and lead, was now perfectly still. Silas Crow, a man of such immense, terrible power, lay in a broken, undignified heap on his own porch. He was just a body. The townsmen Henderson, Gable, and the others lowered their rifles, their faces a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a strange, sick relief. The Navajo, their small, desperate band, stood frozen at the end of the street, their wail cut short. Mia's hand was still on Taza's arm, her fingers digging into his muscle. She was shaking, the adrenaline draining away, leaving a cold, hollow emptiness. It was over, but it did not feel like a victory. It felt finished. Taza did not look at the body. His eyes were scanning. He pulled Mia back toward the alley, his body still a shield. "It is not finished," he whispered, his voice a low growl. "Where is Dutch?" Pike was dead near the water trough. The man on the roof was dead. 2 others were down in the street, but Dutch, the massive, brutal foreman, was gone. He had vanished. Mr. Henderson walked slowly into the middle of the street. His shotgun held loose. He looked at the body on the porch, then at Mia and Taza. His face was pale. He did it," Henderson said, his voice awed. "He really did it." Sheriff Brody, who had been hiding inside his office, crept out, his hands still raised. It's over. I'll take charge now." Taza stepped out from the alley, the sledgehammer still in his hand. He looked at Brody, and his contempt was so pure, so cold, that the sheriff visibly shrank. "You are in charge of nothing," Taza said, his voice flat. What now? Miss Carter," Gable called out, his rifle looking unfamiliar in his shopkeeper's hands. The town, in that moment, had transferred its allegiance. The power vacuum left by Crow now centered on the very woman he had tried to destroy. Mia did not look at them. She looked at Taza. He had not needed to speak. She knew what he was thinking. This fight was not about a man. It was about the land, and the proof was still locked away. "The land office," Mia said, her voice hoarse but clear. She and Taza moved as one. They did not go to the saloon. They walked past the body, past the staring townsmen, to the small building that held Crow's legal power. Henderson and Gable, after a shared look, followed them. The door was locked. Dutch had not made it inside. "Henderson," Mia said. The blacksmith nodded. He took the sledgehammer from Taza. He was a man who knew how to break things. He slammed the heavy hammer into the door, just beside the lock. Wood splintered. He hit it again, and the door crashed open. The room inside was dark, smelling of paper and stale cigars. It was meticulously clean, and on the far wall, a huge, beautifully drawn map. Mia, Taza, and the 2 townsmen stopped, frozen. It was the valley, their valley. Every ranch, every creek, every homestead. A large portion, including Mia's ranch, was outlined in red ink, but that was not the horrifying part. The rest of the map, almost the entire county, was sectioned off in blue. Henderson's pasture, Gable's store, the blacksmith shop, the open range, the high canyons where Taza's people lived, all of it. My God, Gable whispered, stepping closer. That's my property. He was not just taking your ranch, Missy, Henderson said, his voice thick with a new, cold rage. He was taking everything. Mia understood. The harassment, the poison, it was not just to drive her out. It was to devalue the land, to scare everyone, so he could buy it all for pennies on the dollar. He was not building a ranch. He was building an empire. Taza was not looking at the map. He was at Crow's desk. It was locked. He looked at Henderson. The blacksmith, without a word, brought the hammer down. The mahogany splintered. The lock burst. Taza pulled the drawers open. Files, ledgers, contracts. Mia's hands were shaking as she found the one marked Carter. She pulled it out. Inside was her father's original mortgage, and underneath it, a stack of other papers. A foreclosure notice, dated 2 days before the fire. It was signed by Judge Allen. He had it all planned, she whispered. The fire was just cleaning up. He had the judge in his pocket. He had everyone, Gable said bitterly. Pulling another ledger from the drawer, he opened it. It was a simple payment book. Sheriff Brody, $50. Judge Allen, $500. 500, Henderson swore. He sold us all for $500. But Taza was looking in the back of the drawer. He pulled out a heavy, leather-bound book. It was not a ledger. It was a private journal, and tucked inside it, a folded sheaf of letters. Mia took them. They were on thick, expensive paper, the letterhead from the Transcontinental Railroad. She read the first one, her voice quiet in the dusty, ruined office. Mr. Crow, we are pleased to hear of your progress in securing the water rights along the Carter Creek Pass. Your assurances that the native problem will be resolved by spring are most encouraging. Once the valley is cleared and the land consolidated, our surveyors will move in. The company is prepared to offer the full sum agreed upon for sole depot rights. It was all there. The conspiracy, the poison, the harassment, the removal of Taza's people, the payoffs. It was not just one man's greed. It was a vast, cold machine of progress, and Silas Crow had been its willing, brutal cog. He was going to sell the entire valley to the railroad, leaving everyone, white and native alike, with nothing. Mia's voice broke. He killed my father. He burned my home. He hunted your people, all for a train depot. He was a monster, Gable said, his voice shaking with fury. We let a monster rule us. We will take this, Henderson said, gathering the ledgers, his face set like iron. We will take all of it. We will ride to Prescott. We will give this to the territorial marshal. We will see that judge hang. He and Gable, clutching the books, their eyes burning with a new, righteous fire, turned and left the office. They were men with a new, terrible purpose. The room was suddenly quiet. Mia and Taza were left alone, the heavy silence ringing in their ears. The adrenaline was gone, leaving only the deep, aching throb of exhaustion, grief, and shock. Mia sank into Crow's plush leather chair. It was over. He was dead. The proof was found. And then the true cost, hit her. Jed, she whispered, her hands coming up to cover her face. Oh, Taza Jed, I left him. He is probably... She could not finish the sentence. Taza was beside her. He did not touch her. Not yet. He just stood, a solid, breathing presence in the cold room. We will go to him, he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. She dropped her hands. She was clutching the letter about the railroad. This is the proof that he killed my father. The tears finally came. Not hot tears of grief, but cold, angry tears of violation. He took everything from me. He took everything from you. He did not take us, Taza said. She looked up at him. He was standing over her, his face bruised, his shirt torn. He was the most beautiful, terrible thing she had ever seen. In the alley, she said, her voice a low rasp. You saw him. The man on the roof. He was aiming for me." Taza nodded. His eyes did not leave hers. "But you also saw Dutch." She continued, the realization dawning, a slow, hot sunrise in her chest. "He was at the door. He was going for these papers. For the proof." He said nothing. He did not need to. You let him go," she whispered, her heart stopping. "You chose me. You could have had the proof, the thing that could save your land, and you chose me." Taza's expression did not change, but his eyes softened. "The papers are paper. The land is the land. You are Yihina. You are life." He said it simply, as a fact. He reached out, his hand rough, his fingers calloused. He hesitated, just for a moment, and then he touched her face. His thumb brushed a streak of soot from her cheek. It was a gesture of such profound, quiet intimacy that it made her entire body ache. "I thought I had lost you," she whispered, leaning into his touch, her eyes closing. "When I saw you on the porch, with that rope around your neck, I thought I was too late." "You were never late," he said, his voice rough. He tangled his hand in her hair, holding her, anchoring her. "When you spoke, I was no longer a prisoner. I was home." "Taza," she breathed, the name a prayer. The world outside, the dead men, the frightened town, the lost ranch, it all fell away. There was only the ruined office, the smell of dust and paper, and the solid, warm reality of him. "This is madness," she whispered against his shirt. The practical, painful truth trying to break through. "The town, they will never—" "I do not care about the town," he said, his voice fierce, his arms closing around her, pulling her up from the chair and against him. "I do not care about the world. I care about this valley, and I care about you." It was not a gentle embrace. It was a collision. It was two people, battered and broken by the same storm, finally finding shore. She buried her face in his shoulder, her hands gripping him, holding on as if he were the only solid thing left in the world. He held her just as tightly, his hand on the back of her head, his face pressed into her hair. It was a promise, a treaty, an oath, all sealed in silence, built not on words, but on shared battle, shared loss, and a respect that had, against all odds, become a desperate, profound love. The embrace, in the cold, dusty office, could not last. The world crashed back in, announced by the sound of Mr. Henderson clearing his throat in the doorway. He and Gable were holding the ledgers, their faces grim and set. Mia and Taza broke apart, but not in shame. It was an interruption, not an ending. The heat of that moment, the profound, desperate connection, was now a shield between them and the world. "Miss Carter," Henderson said, his voice respectful. He did not look at Taza with hostility, but with a kind of awed, wary respect. We are riding for Prescott. Right now. We are taking this filth to the territorial marshal. We will see Judge Allen in chains." Gable nodded, clutching a ledger. "By the time the railroad surveyors get here, they will not be dealing with Silas Crow. They will be dealing with the United States government and with us." Henderson looked at her, the question plain on his face. Will you ride with us? Your testimony, it would—" Mia looked at the papers, the proof of her father's murder. She could go. She could be the star witness, the avenging daughter. She could reclaim her name, her place in the white world. She could be Mia Carter of the Carter Ranch once more. She looked at Taza. He stood beside her, his face bruised, his clothing torn, the sledgehammer still resting near his feet. He was the savage they had wanted to hang. He was the man who had, without a second thought, chosen her life over the very proof Henderson now held. She knew, in that instant, that her place was no longer in that world. Her name was not what mattered. Her life was what mattered. "No, Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice clear and steady. "You are good men. You do what you must. You tell the marshal what happened here. You tell them Silas Crow's reign is over." She paused. "I have to go to my ranch. I have to see to my man." The ambiguity hung in the air. Henderson, a practical man, nodded, assuming she meant Jed. "Godspeed, Missy. You did your father proud today. You did us all proud." He and Gable turned and left, their boots heavy on the boardwalk. They were men on a mission. Mia and Taza walked out into the pale, smoky light. The street was quiet, the bodies already being tended to by the few brave women of the town. The Navajo, Taza's people, were waiting at the end of the street, a small, silent cluster. Taza's relative, the woman with the hard eyes, met his gaze. He spoke to her in Dine, his voice low and fast. She nodded, her eyes shifting to Mia, then back to Taza. "Jed," Taza said to Mia, translating his own words. "He is failing, and Dutch is still loose." "We will find him," the woman said in her dry, rasping English. "The Chindi, the one who ran, he cannot hide from us." She and her small band turned and, without another sound, melted into the alleys and shadows. They were hunters now. They had a purpose. Mia and Taza went for their horses. They rode, not walking, not running, but a ground-eating, frantic gallop. They left the town of Redemption behind, a place of smoke and death, and rode for the high, cold canyons. The ride was silent, a shared, thrumming dread pounding in time with the horses' hooves. The image of Jed, his fevered eyes, his rattling breath, was all Mia could see. They reached the hidden canyon. The air was still. The small fire had died to pale embers. Jed was on the blankets. He was not moving. "Jed," Mia whispered, sliding from the bay, her legs almost buckling. She ran to him, falling to her knees on the cold cave floor. "Jed, no, please." He was so still. His face was waxy, his eyes closed, but as she touched his cheek, his eyelids fluttered. They opened, but they were not clear. They were milky with fever, seeing things that were not there. He saw her, a flicker of recognition. "Mia, child," he rasped. And then his eyes shifted, focusing on the tall, dark shape that filled the cave entrance behind her. Taza. Even in his delirium, the fear was immediate, a lifetime of ingrained prejudice. Jed's hand, thin as a bird's claw, tried to grip her arm. "Girl," he panted. "Behind you, Injun." "He is my friend, Jed," Mia said, her voice breaking, her tears falling onto his hand. "He is my friend. He saved my life. We stopped Crow. It is over." "Crow?" Jed's gaze was uncomprehending. He is dead," Taza said. His voice was quiet, holding no threat. He moved forward, stepping into the dim light. He carried a small pouch at his belt. He knelt, not next to Jed, but a respectful distance away, and began to mix some dried bark with the last of the water in a small cup. Jed stared at him, his fear warring with his confusion. You brought him here to save me?" "He is not the enemy, Jed," Mia wept, holding his hand to her cheek. "He never was. I was wrong. We were all wrong." Taza moved closer. "You are burning," he said, his voice rough. "This will cool the fever." He held the cup out. Jed looked at the dark, strange-smelling liquid. He looked at the bruised, imposing face of the warrior holding it. Then he looked at Mia. He saw her face, the tear-streaked, soot-stained devotion. He saw the way she trusted this man, the way she was bound to him. In his final, fevered moments, the old man's world cracked open. He saw it. He chose you," Jed whispered, not to Mia but to Taza. Taza nodded, his expression unreadable. "Drink." Jed looked back at Mia. Slowly, he let Taza lift his head and hold the cup to his lips. He drank a little, then coughed. A terrible, wet, final sound that racked his frail body. He fell back, his breathing ragged. He gripped Mia's hand. "You're your father," he panted. his voice a thread. He would be so proud. Mia, so stubborn just like him.
"Jed, please," she sobbed. "Do not leave me, please."
He was right, Jed whispered. That crow is a monster. His eyes found Taza again, the fear gone, replaced by a sad, profound understanding. But this world, child, it ain't ready for you two. We do not care about the world, Taza said, his voice low. We care about this land. We care about our people. Jed smiled. It was a faint, papery, thin movement of his lips. But it was real. That's good. He squeezed her hand, his eyes fixed on her face, trying to memorize it. His grip loosened, his eyes closed, and the terrible, rattling breath just stopped. The silence in the cave was absolute. It was the silence of the stones, of the dust, of the end.
"Jed,"
Mia whispered.
"Jed, no, Jed."
She collapsed over his chest, her sobs tearing out of her, a raw animal sound of complete and final grief. It was all gone. Her father, her home, her past, Jed, her last link, her final family was gone. She was utterly, terrifyingly alone. Taza placed his hand on her shoulder. He did not speak. He did not offer platitudes. He just stood there, a solid, living presence in a cave of death. He let her grieve, his hand a steady, warm weight, the only anchor in her spinning world. After a long time, the sobs subsided into dry, shuddering breaths. She sat up, her face a mask of grief, her eyes empty. He was right, she whispered, her voice dead.
"I have nothing. I have no one. The world is not ready for us."
He was right that it is not ready, Taza said, his voice quiet. He was wrong that you have nothing. You have me, and you have the land. He stood and pulled her gently to her feet. He led her from the dimness of the cave, from the presence of her past, out into the sharp, clear air. The sun was setting, a blaze of orange and violet over the western rim of the valley. He burned your wood, Taza said, his voice not soft but hard, forcing her to listen. He broke your glass, but he did not burn this. He swept his arm out, not at her ruined ranch, but at the mountains, the sky, the vast, empty, beautiful land. This is our home, not a house. This. They will take it, she whispered, the hopelessness a shroud. Crow is dead, but the railroad they are not. They will come. They will bring soldiers. They will send surveyors. They will take it all anyway. We won, Taza, but we lost. Jed is dead. My home is gone. Your people are starving. No, he said, and his voice was so fierce it startled her. We did not lose. He turned her, his hands on her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. The town has the proof. Henderson, Gable, they will fight. The railroad. They are businessmen. They want land. Yes, but they do not want a war. Not a war with the town, and not a war with the town and the dying. A war. We will not be driven out again. Taza said, his eyes burning. My people, they will come back. Not as victims, not as ghosts, as partners. With the town, Henderson needs this valley. Gable needs this valley. They know we will fight with them now, not against them. You showed them that. You joined us. You spoke for us. This was the choice, the hard, painful, terrifying choice. It was not just about their love. It was about their future. But me, she whispered, the old fear returning. Live with you here in the valley. They will never accept it. Jed was right. They will call me, they will call you. I told you, Taza said, his grip on her shoulders gentle, but unbreakable. I do not care about the world. I care about this. You are Ihina. You are my life. I will not let you go. This was his choice. He was not choosing her over his people, or his people over her. He was choosing both. He was refusing to believe they were separate. My people, they accept you. He said, You are the woman who speaks. You are the one who faced Crow. You are the one with the dying heart. You are one of us. You are ours."
"But I am Bilagana,"
she whispered, the word feeling strange on her tongue. "White." "You are Mia," he said, as if that was the only word, the only truth that mattered. "That is enough. It will be hard." He was not offering her a fantasy. He was offering her the truth. "This world, it is a hard place. The town will whisper. They will stare. But we will not hide. Not in these canyons. We will build. Together."
"Build?"
she asked, the word sounding foreign.
"Build what with what I have nothing?"
"You have your father's land," he said, and a fierce, possessive look came into his eyes.
"The paper is just paper. The land is waiting. We will build a new house, of stone, from the river.
A house they cannot burn." This was the plan. Not to defeat Silas, but to outlive him, to rebuild, to unite the valley, to create a new world, because the old one was not ready. Mia looked at the valley, her valley, painted in the colors of the sunset. She thought of her father's sacrifice. She thought of Jed's last words. She looked at Taza, his bruised face, his steady, unwavering eyes. He was offering her a life, a hard life, a real life. She would not be running. She would not be hiding. She would be home. She took a deep, shuddering breath. The dead, empty feeling was gone. In its place, a small, hard, familiar spark. Carter's stubbornness. Sand. "They will not make it easy," she said, her voice no longer dead, but quiet, and as hard as the stones he wanted to build with. "We have never had easy," Taza replied. She nodded. The decision was made. "All right," she said. "We build." She turned from the sunset and walked back into the cave, back to her last, lost piece of the past.
"But first,"
she said, her voice thick with a new, quiet grief,
"we honor our dead."
They buried Jed on the ridge above the hidden canyon, a place that overlooked the valley. It was hard, grinding work. The earth was stone and root. Taza, using the head of the sledgehammer and a broken piece of shovel they had found, did the heavy labor. He worked with a steady, rhythmic, tireless motion. He was not just digging a hole. He was performing a rite. Mia sat and watched, her body numb, her mind empty. She had wrapped Jed in his own saddle blanket. It was all she had to give him. She had cried all her tears in the cave. Now, there was just a cold, hollow ache, a void where her old life used to be. When the grave was deep enough, Taza stepped back. Mia looked at him. She did not know what to do. She knew the words from the Bible, the ones her father had said over her mother. Ashes to ashes. But the words felt hollow. Like the house, they belonged to a world that had burned down. Taza seemed to understand. He went and returned with a handful of corn pollen, a sacred, life-giving dust. He put it in Mia's hand. "He was your family," Taza said. "You speak for him." Mia looked at the yellow pollen. She looked at the blanket-wrapped body. She thought of Jed's last, kind smile. She thought of his loyalty.
"He was a good man,"
she whispered, her voice a dry rasp.
"He was my father's friend, and he was my friend. He was brave."
She let the pollen drift from her hand into the grave. "May you find peace. Jed, may you find my father. Tell him I am all right. Tell him I am not running." She stepped back. Taza took up the shovel. He did not say words. He simply began the work, the dirt and stones making a soft, final sound as they covered the blanket. When it was done, he found a large, flat piece of sandstone. He and Mia, straining together, lifted it and placed it at the head of the grave. A marker. It had no name, but the land would know. They stood there for a long time. The sun was high. The valley spread out below them, vast and silent. "He is at peace," Taza said. "Is he?" Mia asked, the bitterness a cold taste in her mouth.
Or is he just gone? Crow is dead. Jed is dead. My father is dead. Taza's aunt is dead. Sometimes it feels like the dead are the only ones who won.
The dead are at peace, Taza said, his voice quiet but firm. It is the living who must fight. We honor them. He nodded at the grave. By living, by building. He gently took her arm. It is time to go. Go where? She asked, the emptiness returning.
We have no home.
We go to our land, he said. They rode down from the high country. They did not go to the town. They rode to the smoking, blackened ruins of the Carter Ranch. The silence was profound. The fire was days old. The ashes cold. Mia walked through the devastation, her boots crunching on the charred bones of her life. The great stone chimneys stood, black and lonely, like tombstones. The foundation, the solid river stone her father had laid, was all that remained. She touched the soot-covered rock. This was where the porch had been, where she and Jed had sat. That was where the kitchen had been. She remembered the smell of baking bread. The memories were so sharp, so clear, that they were a physical pain. This wound, she knew, would never fully heal. It would be a scar, a part of her, a place that would ache when the wind blew. Taza did not follow her through the ruins. He was not trespassing on her grief. He walked the perimeter. He went to the well. He tasted the water. He went to the creek, the one Crow had poisoned. He followed it upstream, walking, his eyes on the ground. Mia finally sat on the foundation, on the cold stone, and just was. She was the daughter of a murdered man, the owner of a pile of ash. Taza returned an hour later. He was carrying something. The water is clean, he said. The poison was high up. The creek has washed it away. It is safe. He held out his hand. In it was a single, tiny, perfect blue flower, the kind that only grew deep in the shade by the water. It is growing back, he said. The land, it heals itself. We are the same. He placed the flower on the stone beside her. He looked at the foundation, at the tall, strong chimneys. Your father was a good builder. Taza said, the stone is strong. We can use this. We will build here. Mia looked at the flower. She looked at his bruised, earnest face. He was not offering her comfort. He was offering her work. He was offering her a future, built on the strongest part of her past. Before she could answer, a shadow fell over them. Taza was on his feet in an instant, his hand on the knife at his belt. It was the Navajo woman, Taza's relative. She was not alone. The old man with the bow was with her. They had appeared as silently as Taza had. He is gone, the woman said, her voice flat. Dutch? Taza asked. The woman nodded. He ran, like a coyote. He stole a horse from a homestead to the north. We followed. He was a loud rider. He left a wide trail. Where is he? Mia asked, standing up, her heart suddenly cold, the last piece of the nightmare. He went east, the woman said, her eyes dark and empty. Into the Bishlichi, the Red Rock country, a bad place. He did not know the water. We stopped following. Mia and Taza looked at each other. They both knew that land. It was a maze of dry canyons, a beautiful, merciless trap. He had no water. Taza said it was not a question. No water, the woman confirmed. His horse gave out 2 days ago. We found it. He is given to the land. The sun and the stones will have him. A cold, final justice. Dutch would not be brought back in chains. He would not stand trial. He would simply be erased, just as he had tried to erase her. It was a brutal end, a Western end. It is finished, Taza said. He looked at his relative. Our people. They are waiting, she said. The town, they are afraid, but they are not hostile. We need food. Go to Gable's store, Mia said, the words strange on her tongue. Tell him Mia Carter sent you. Tell him to put it on my account. The woman's eyes widened. Just a fraction? An account? Credit? She looked at Taza, who nodded. Go, he said. We will be there. We will get supplies. We will meet you at the river. The Navajo left, as silently as they came. An account? Taza asked. A flicker of something, almost a smile, in his eyes. We have to build, do we not? Mia said, dusting the ash from her hands. We need nails, and canvas, and flour. The town, Taza said, his face growing serious. They will not make it easy. Then we will not make it easy for them, Mia said. She mounted the bay. Taza mounted his pony. They did not ride to the ruins again. They rode, side by side, straight down the main trail, toward redemption. It was mid-afternoon. The town was alive, but it was a nervous, haunted life. The saloon was a blackened, gaping hole. Crow's body was gone. The bodies of his men were gone. The street was clean, too clean. As they rode down the main street, the world stopped. Mrs. Henderson, sweeping her porch, froze, her broom in midair. Two men talking outside the land office, which was now boarded up with a notice from the territorial marshal, went silent. They stared. Mia Carter, the ruined rancher girl, was back, and she was riding with the Navajo warrior, Taza, not as a prisoner, not as a fugitive, but as an equal. The whispers were a wind, starting at one end of the street and following them down. The women stared at Mia, their eyes wide with a mix of shock, judgment, and a strange, fearful respect. The men stared at Taza, their hands near their holsters, but their eyes held no malice, only a deep, wary awe. This was the man who had faced the rope. This was the man who had stood with her. Sheriff Brody was standing outside his office. He saw them coming. He visibly straightened his vest, his face pale. He did not go for his gun. He looked like a schoolboy caught cheating. Miss Carter, he stammered as she rode past. Mr. Taza, a fine day. Taza did not even look at him. Mia just nodded, her gaze fixed forward. They stopped in front of Gable's Mercantile. They dismounted. Every eye on the street was on them. Taza stood by the horses, his arms crossed. He was not a bodyguard. He was a partner. Mia walked up the steps and into the store. Mr. Gable was behind his counter. The store was empty. He looked at her, his face complicated. He had been to Prescott. He had seen the marshal. He had come back a different man. Miss Carter, he said, his voice quiet. Mr. Gable, she replied. We heard about Jed, he said, fumbling with a stack of cans. I am truly sorry for your loss. He was a good man. Yes, he was, Mia said. An awkward, heavy silence filled the store. I need supplies, Mia said, her voice clear. All business. 20 pounds of flour, 10 of coffee, a keg of nails, the long ones, and 2 bolts of heavy canvas. Gable stared. This was not a woman running. This was a woman building. Of course, he said, turning to his shelves. That will be quite a sum. Put it on my account, Mia said. Gable froze. He turned back to her. His eyes flickered to the door, to the tall, dark shape of the Navajo warrior standing guard outside. He looked at Mia, her steady, gray eyes. He saw the iron in her. He saw the future. He licked his lips, then he nodded, a quick, jerky motion. Of course, Miss Carter. On your account. Mia nodded. I will send a wagon for it tomorrow. She turned and walked out. She stepped onto the boardwalk, back into the sunlight, and stood next to Taza. She had done it. She had faced them. They were not alone, and they were not afraid. Taza looked at her. He had seen the whole exchange. He saw the fear in Gable's eyes, and the respect. He saw the whispers of the town. He saw the long, hard road ahead of them. Mia met his gaze. The wound of her loss was raw. Her home was gone. Her last family member was in the cold ground.
But she was not broken. She had faced down death. She had faced down a mob. And she had just faced down the quiet, cruel judgment of the world she had been born into. She looked at Taza, at this man who had sacrificed everything for her, who was willing to build a new life with her from the ashes. She had learned, in the fire and the blood, what mattered. It was not the house. It was not the name. It was the land. It was the love. A love born not of softness, but of shared, brutal hardship. It was the resilience to stand up, after everything, and say, "We build." She took a deep breath of the dusty, free air. "Let's go home," she said. They rode away from redemption, leaving the whispers and the stares behind them. The ride home was quiet. But it was a different quiet than before. The hollow, aching grief for Jed was still there, a sharp stone in Mia's heart. The image of her ruined house, a black skeleton against the sky, was still a fresh wound. But the fear was gone. The desperation, the feeling of being hunted and alone, had been burned away in the fire and the fight. She rode beside Taza. She looked at his hands on the reins, the same hands she had declared held worth, bruised, strong, capable. She thought of his choice in the alley, the moment he had thrown himself at her, letting the proof, the key to his people's survival, vanish, all to save her. And she thought of her own choice, standing in that store, claiming her credit, claiming her place. With him standing at her back for the whole town to see, they were bound, not by words or promises, but by shared blood, shared loss, and a shared, stubborn refusal to be broken. When they reached the ruins, the sun was low, casting long, peaceful shadows. The place no longer looked like a graveyard. It looked like a beginning. The tall, defiant stone chimneys were anchors. The foundation was a promise. They did not start on the house that day. They made camp by the creek, using the new canvas she had bought on credit. Taza lit a fire, small and efficient. He shared the food his people had brought. It was not much, a little dried meat, some cornmeal, but it was a shared meal. Later that evening, the rest of his people came, the woman with the hard eyes. Taza's relative led them. They were a small, haunted group, but their eyes were no longer empty. They had seen Taza freed. They had seen Crow fall. They had seen the town turn. They brought the supplies Mia had ordered, hauled on a travois. They made their camp near Mia's, a respectful distance, but close enough for the warmth of their fires to mingle. They did not speak to her, but they nodded. It was an acknowledgement. She was no longer just Bilagana. She was Taza's woman. She was the one who spoke. The next morning, the work began. Taza and his people started on their own shelters first. They did not build hogans so close to the white man's road. They built simple, practical lean-tos, a temporary camp. Mia, in turn, shared all the food she had. On the third day, a wagon rumbled up the track. Mia and Taza both tensed, their hands moving to their weapons. It was Mr. Henderson. He was alone. The wagon was loaded with the supplies from Gables, the flour, the coffee, the nails. But there was more. He had brought 2 heavy axes, a bundle of new shovels, and a side of smoked bacon. He hauled the wagon to a stop, his eyes taking in the scene. He saw the ruins of the house. He saw Mia, alive and well, in her patched trousers. And he saw the Navajo camp by the river, the women tending a fire, the old man mending a bow. Henderson's face was a complicated map of prejudice, pragmatism, and a new, grudging respect. He was a man of the old world, and this scene was wrong. But he was also the man who had seen Silas Crow's ledgers. He was the man who had followed Mia into a gunfight. He just grunted, climbing down from the wagon. "Figured you'd need these," he said, not looking at Taza, but not ignoring him either. He just spoke to Mia. "The bacon's from my own smokehouse." Gable, he put in some extra coffee. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," Mia said, her voice quiet. "The town," Henderson said, wiping his hands on his trousers. "They're talking." "Let them," Mia said. "The marshal in Prescott, he took the ledgers. He arrested Judge Allen. The whole thing's a scandal. They're sending a new judge, and we got word this morning." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a telegraph, flimsy, from the railroad. Mia took it. Her hands were steady. The railroad company, in light of the unfortunate civil unrest and the criminal conspiracy of its local agent, was formally withdrawing its offer for the Valley lands. They would be rerouting their main depot 20 miles to the south. The Valley was safe. Mia felt a lightness in her chest, so sudden she almost staggered. She had not realized she was still carrying that weight. She had won. Her father, Jed, their deaths had not been for nothing. "That's good news," she said, her voice thick. "It is." Henderson agreed. He looked over at Taza, who was watching him, his face impassive. Henderson gave a stiff, short nod. "We the town, we owe you, both of you. Crow would have ruined us all." He turned, and with a new energy, began to unload the wagon. "You're going to rebuild?" "We are," Mia said. "Good," Henderson said, dropping a sack of flour onto the foundation. "Stone's good. Your father built it to last. You'll need help with the beams. The sawmill, it'll give you a fair price. I'll make sure of it." He did not offer to help. He did not stay. He just unloaded the supplies, climbed back onto his wagon, and, with a final, awkward tip of his hat, he drove away. The silence he left was not awkward. It was peaceful. It was the sound of the first bridge being built, a bridge of bacon and coffee and pragmatism. The rebuilding was slow. It was not a magical, easy thing. It was brutal, back-breaking work. They started by clearing the ash. Mia and Taza worked side by side, their hands raw, their faces black with soot. They saved what could be saved: a handful of iron skillets, warped but usable, a set of fireplace tools, a few pieces of her mother's china, miraculously intact in the wreckage. Taza's people helped. They were masters of stone and earth. They helped her mix the mortar. They helped her and Taza quarry new river stones. In return, Mia's credit at the store fed them. Her remaining cattle, which Taza and his people helped her round up from the high canyons, were now a shared herd. It was not charity. It was a community. Spring came. The land healed. The faint green fuzz of new grass covered the scars of the fire. The creek ran clear and full, and the house rose. It was not the same house. It was built on the same foundation, used the same tall chimneys, but it was different. It was simpler, stronger. It had wide windows to let in the unforgiving sun, and thick walls to keep out the cold. Taza, with his own hands, built a shaded porch, a ramada, on the west side, a place to sit out of the heat. It was part ranch house, part something else. It was theirs. The whispers in town did not stop, but they changed. When Mia rode in for supplies, with Taza beside her, the staring was no longer hostile. It was watchful, curious. Mrs. Henderson, who had once turned her back, now nodded to Mia, a stiff, reluctant nod. But it was a nod. The valley was changing. The fear was gone. Silas Crow was a ghost, a story to tell. Dutch was never found, a buggyman swallowed by the desert. The new judge was a fair, hard man who had no patience for thievery, from white or native. And the Navajo, they were no longer shadows in the hills. They were neighbors. Their camp by the river was now a small, permanent settlement. Their children were seen. Their sheep grazed. One evening, as the long, purple shadows of summer stretched across the valley, Mia stood on the new porch of her new house. The smell of fresh-cut pine from the roof beams mingled with the scent of Taza's cook fire. She was not in trousers. She wore a simple calico dress. She was still scarred. The memory of Jed, of her father, was a quiet ache that would always be there. But she was not broken. She was whole. Taza came and stood beside her. He did not touch her. Not at first. They had been partners. allies for months, rebuilding this life. Their love had been a silent, unspoken foundation under all the work. It was in the way he handed her a tool, the way she saved him the last of the coffee. He looked out at the valley. His valley, her valley, their valley. "It is quiet," he said. "It is peaceful," she replied. He took her hand. His was rough from the stone, hers from the mortar and the wood, their fingers laced together. A perfect, imperfect fit. "Your father," Taza said, his voice low. "He would be proud of this house." "He would," Mia whispered, leaning her head against his shoulder. "He would have liked you, I think, after he tried to shoot you." Taza almost smiled. "Probably." They stood, watching the sun set, painting the high cliffs in fire and gold. The land was not a place of violence. It was not a place of hate. It was just home. A new home, built from the ashes of the old. A home built on stubbornness, on courage, and on a love that the world was not ready for, but would have to learn to accept. They had not just survived. They had won. They had built a future. One handful of stone, one act of kindness, one day at a time. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to hear your thoughts, so please comment below with where you are listening from so we can all connect. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel, Wild West Tales, like this video, and show your support by pressing the hype button so this story can be heard by more people.